All right. So we will start with the first group of people that are here. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about disaster mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery resources for artists and art and cultural institutions. Like all things we do at FEMA, we never do this alone. We are excited to collaborate with a number of partners, including our colleagues at the National Endowment for the Arts. A few things to know about this webinar, a few technical considerations. One, if you have questions or if you're going to include questions, please use the Q&A pod. That's the Q&A button in the chat, and we will try to get to as many of those questions as possible. This webinar is being recorded, and of course we have closed captioning and ASL interpretation available. Key thing to also know, this will not be the last time this year that you will hear from FEMA and the National Endowment of the Arts and our partners around topics of this area. So super excited for you to join both the FEMA Emergency Management Agency, Voluntary Agency Coordination Section, and IA, Individual Assistance, and the DHS Center for Faith-Based Neighborhood Partnerships, and a whole host of other partners for our first webinar of the year. What you can expect from the webinar today is going to start with some opening remarks from some very esteemed colleagues, both from the National Endowment of the Arts and FEMA. It's going to be followed up by a panel discussion with our leader in FEMA External Affairs, Director Justice Knight, and Sergeant Advanced Facilitator. And we have some special guests, both from non-government organizations and from government organizations. And we will also have some additional presentations about resources that emergency managers and artists and art and cultural institutions can use to jumpstart their collaborations together with some calls to action. What's also included in this presentation are references to some existing resources, and we are really excited to talk a little bit more about where we are headed as well. But one example of a resource that exists today is the Inspiration book on arts and experiential learning. This provides a lot of great examples for emergency managers or for hazard mitigation professionals or for people who just care about the community and want to find a way to make sure that they're increasing opportunities for the art community and the emergency management community to work together. There'll be several examples, not just from this guide, but from other resources that will be shared throughout this presentation as well. So with that, I would actually like to start with opening remarks from two of our colleagues. The first that I'll have come up is from the National Endowment of the Arts, one of our key partners federally, Michael Orlov. And then we will introduce Mr. Frank Matranga. So Michael, I'm going to stop sharing the slides and I will pass it over to you if you want to come off camera and come Mike.
Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here. My name is Michael Orlov. I'm the Director of State, Regional, and Local Partnerships and International Activities for the National Endowment for the Arts. We're excited to be with all of you today, and I want to start by thanking our FEMA partners for hosting this webinar and for their partnership and commitment to the arts and culture sector. We couldn't be more appreciative of the invitation to collaborate with our federal colleagues, so thanks again to the team at FEMA for the invitation. The National Endowment for the Arts has a long history of responding to disasters. Most recently in Puerto Rico after Hurricanes Maria and Fiona, when the National Endowment for the Arts staff were deployed to the island to assist with recovery and mitigation projects for artists and arts and cultural organizations. Our agency has also funded multiple grants related to disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. These projects focused on a range of topics, including individual and community healing, recovery support to artists and cultural institutions, integration of art into city mitigation planning and plans for rebuilding, and disaster preparedness planning. The National Endowment for the Arts also sits on the steering committees of coalitions that can help artists and arts organizations both prepare for and respond to emergencies, including the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response, NCAPER, and the Heritage Emergency National Task Force, HENTF, who you will hear from later today. As disasters increase in number and severity, we know firsthand artists and arts organizations are often some of the most vulnerable populations and can face challenges accessing relief funds and services. While the National Endowment for the Arts does not have the resources to fund disaster recovery, we are focused on the areas where we can be a resource: field building and knowledge sharing. And we are working to strengthen our federal and private partnerships to better serve the arts field. This webinar is just one example of those efforts. And once again, we are grateful to the leadership of FEMA for organizing today's webinar. Before I turn things back to FEMA, I would like to acknowledge my colleague, Eleanor Billington, who is the Civic Partnerships Manager at the NEA. Part of Eleanor's portfolio includes the management of our disaster readiness and response portfolio, and we're excited to have her focus on this work. Gratitude to all of you for taking time out of your day to participate in this webinar, and I will pass the microphone back to Marcus. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much, and appreciate everything that the National Endowment of the Arts continues to do. I would now like to call up our friend and leader for FEMA's Director of Individual Assistance, Frank Matranga. Frank, as you are giving your comments, if you want me to share a slide about some of the reforms, I can. But at first, I want people to put a face to the name and just tell me when you want me to pull up the slide, sir.
Great. Thank you, Marcus, and good afternoon, everyone. And, thanks a ton for the opportunity to speak about arts and emergency management. This is very well timed, as we will get to in a second here, and I'll let Marcus show a slide of some of the great news we have. But before that, my name is Frank Matranga, and I'm the head of FEMA's Individual Assistance Program. The Individual Assistance Program it's the program by which FEMA directly helps survivors after a disaster. You may know us from some hits as assistance we provide, financial assistance we provide to folks, occasionally providing assistance in group sites and what are commonly referred to as FEMA trailers. That all is the umbrella program of the individual assistance program. So first, I'd like to thank our colleagues from the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response, and the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, as well as you, Marcus, for kind of spearheading this initiative and getting everyone here together. As I tell our staff on the federal side, the first rule in emergency management is all disasters are local. They start with a neighbor helping a neighbor and helping them understand what's happening with the storm, evacuate if they need to get out of the storm's way. And at the end, they end with on our best days, they end with a community that has a renewed sense of hope and belonging and is a better community than was there before the disaster. And in that context, the connections between arts and emergency management are incredibly unique. In the space I work in, which is after a disaster, artists are both survivors and key collaborators in helping a community recover. And I think, as a lot of you probably know, art really can be a lifeline of hope amidst all of the loss that happens in a disaster. It can reconnect a community to the sense of belonging and identity and really a sense of place. At FEMA, we have to travel often, and we go to different parts of the country after a disaster to help them, with their recovery. And one of the really difficult parts of that travel, and it's very important for us to do it, is to see the devastation in a community. And I can tell you, it's difficult to be in a community right after an event. And a lot of you, I'm sure, have had similar experiences of you can visualize and see the devastation all around you, and it's heavy. One of my favorite things about those trips is amidst that devastation, art often plays a role of helping people see a sense of what could be in the future. It's an artist that came and took a debris pile and maybe made it into a sculpture. It's a flag that may have gotten painted or draped over something. And it's those moments and those pictures when you're traveling around a disaster that really, for me, and I think for a lot of the survivors I've talked to, give a sense of a spark of hope and something that is unique. So it is the relationship between emergency management and artists is incredibly important. So I want you to know how much on the FEMA side we value the ability for artists to help communities give that sense of hope. And I want to talk a little bit, and so Marcus, you can pull up the slide here, about the other part of it. So, I said, artists are key collaborators in helping a community recover, but they're also survivors. And so what I'm happy to be here, and this is a very well-timed webinar, is on Friday, FEMA announced some very big reforms to our disaster assistance programs. And what you see on the slide is an overview of what those reforms are. I won't hit on all of them, but I want to talk about one specifically that impacts artists. So for the last 20 years, which is the last time FEMA made major changes to the individual assistance program, we've been getting feedback from survivors, on those trips where we're out there, through formal comments from organizations like the ones we're partnering with here. And a lot of that feedback from survivors, and this isn't going to be new to anyone on the call necessarily, it's not the best. It's that we have processes and programs that don't enable survivors to fully recover. And so for a long time, we've been hearing that feedback, and as the administrator has said multiple times over the past week, we hear that feedback and we know we can do better, and we know we are going to do better. So I'm excited to tell you, here's some ways in which we're trying to do better. So on Friday, FEMA announced some big reforms to the program. We are changing the regulations within the program, and effective 60 days from now, so disasters declared on or after March 22nd, 2024, we're making some big changes to the program, really to fundamentally reduce barriers so people can recover faster. You see the three buckets of big changes there on the slide. Marcus has provided this as a handout, and we'll make sure to get this out to you. But the one I want to specifically call out is in that bottom of that second bucket about simplifying assistance for entrepreneurs. Today, within the individual assistance program, we provide reimbursement for personal property losses. They're limited. The way that Congress has designed the Stafford Act and designed FEMA's authorities it's intended to be supplemental assistance, and we don't pay for everything. But some of the feedback we've gotten, and particularly from artists, is some of the limitations in how the program pays for that property reimbursement, they don't make sense, and they leave artists behind. And so one of the big changes we're making is, under that umbrella of simplifying assistance for entrepreneurs, we're making it so FEMA can provide assistance to self-employed survivors for initial financial support for things that they may have lost. And really it's damaged tools and equipment that's related to their employment. So how this is so impactful for artists is, if you're a photographer and, you live in an area that is flooded and, your camera is washed away, it is both devastating to you because it's your source of employment and income, and it's devastating to the community because your art is helping the community thrive in the way I was talking about earlier. So this assistance, what it's designed is where you lost your camera after an event, we'll help you get it back, and we'll provide you some assistance to do that. And it is a part of some reforms that we're undertaking. The rest are up there, and I won't take any more time to go through all of them. But it is an exciting day for FEMA, both to be making changes this big and also address some feedback we've heard from the artist community of, hey, you're providing all of this assistance, and there are opportunities to make it easier. There are opportunities to expand some of that eligibility to really help artists. So I'm very excited it is a very well-timed webinar, and I'm excited to announce that as one of the resources FEMA is providing is after a disaster, we will help cover some of those costs for artists. So again, thank you for having us here today. I look forward to the conversation and the panelists. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Marcus. Marcus, you're on mute. Yeah, there we
No,
go.
I'm not on mute, Ray. So we work at FEMA.
May I have your attention, please?
What I owe
There
everybody
has
to
been an
know
emergency
is that
reported
there
in the
is a
building.
fire alarm.
Please stand
we are
by
right
for
now.
further information.
We're gonna do a few things for the staff on the call in terms of how we're going to lead. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
May I have your attention,
And
please?
we're going to.
May I have your
properly
attention,
exit
please?
as part of this.
There has been an emergency
What I would like to
reported
do
in the
next,
building.
what we're gonna do
Please
next,
stand by
is
for
we will
further
have,
information.
what we will do next is we will have Nicole
May I have your
facilitate a
attention,
panel
please?
using the same.
May I have your attention, please?
As
There
Justin
has
and
been
I
an
continue to
emergency
facilitate
reported in the
safely.
building.
Once we get to a safe
Please
location,
stand by
we'll
for
rejoin.
further
But
information.
want to make sure that you all continue to be with us. Nicole, we'll have you introduce Ruby, Nana, and Jan.
May I have your
And then we will
attention,
have you ask
please?
the first question.
May I have your
that's
attention,
included in the
please?
Q&A.
There has
Nicole,
been an
over to you.
emergency reported in the building.
I'm grateful for everyone who can join us today and do pardon the small error that we had, but certainly thank you for everyone who's been joining us. As we're going to ask Monica, if you can pull up the slide for us, that would be great. And then we will continue to welcome our guests for our next panel discussion. So we'll give a moment to allow Monica to pull up the PowerPoint for us, and we will continue. Excellent. And the next slide, please. And one slide after that. Wonderful. And at this point, we will begin with our panel discussion. We have, unfortunately, right now, our facilitator is alongside Marcus Coleman. As you had heard, they are in the midst of a fire drill. And so we are just continue to move forward in true FEMA fashion. As he shared, we are flexible and will continue to move forward with that which has been outlined and planned. And with that, we first want to welcome our guests who are with us. We first want to welcome and to please feel free to turn on your camera is Jan Newcomb, for the Executive Director for the National Coalition for Arts, Preparedness, and Disaster Response. We have Ruby Lopez Harper. She's the Executive Director for Craft Emergency Relief Fund. And Dr. Nana Kaneko, she is the Heritage Emergency National Task Force Specialist, FEMA Office of Environmental Planning and Historic Preservation. Want to welcome you all to this conversation, and certainly am grateful for all that you are going to present with us today. With that said, we want to first welcome you to the conversation, and we'll go ahead and turn over to our first question, which is as follows. Where have you seen artists or art organizations and or cultural institutions and emergency managers partner to promote disaster preparedness at the community level? Again, where have you seen artists or art organizations and or cultural institutions and emergency managers partner to promote disaster preparedness at the community level? Let's open up to our panelists.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm Jan Newcomb, and I think I'm supposed to go first, but I am going first. I'm Executive Director of the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness and Emergency Response. And I want to talk about a couple of things to answer this question. Network building is very important at the local level. As Marcus was saying, emergencies and crises and disasters really have a local focus. So in August and September of 2019, my colleague and I from the Performing Arts Readiness Project worked with the California Arts Council, who work with 19 local arts agencies that we drove around the state of California, let me say, for 2 weeks, giving 5-hour workshops to about 19 different organizations and 139 people. And it was the idea of using NCAPER's cultural placekeeping guide as a basis for these community artists and responders to develop their own networks to serve their greater communities in disaster and develop disaster preparedness protocols. And the work was commented on by the executive director of the California Arts Council right after the wildfires and mudslide that year really devastated a lot of California and of course arts communities. I know orchestras were, it was terrible. And what happened is, she said, because of those workshops, that people in the creative community were actually, they knew who the responders were. They had already met with them. And so they were more prepared, and that gave them more hope that they were going to be able to overcome what had just terribly happened in their communities. Another response is, I have to shout out for the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge. They have done, every time a hurricane comes, it's walking over Baton Rouge, it seems, either Lake Charles or Baton Rouge. So they developed, and I want to shout out to Renee Chatelain, who is their executive director. They created the Creative Relief Fund, which is an emergency preparedness and response program, which addresses both community need through an artistic lens and resources to artists and arts organizations, designed to prepare the arts and cultural sector to respond to and recover from a wide range of natural disasters, infectious disease outbreaks, and man-made complex disasters. The Arts Council also has a grants program that Ruby probably knows more about, because they work with Surf Plus on this to strengthen the vitality and sustainability of individuals who endeavor to create and innovate within the state of Louisiana. Also, more recently, I have been working with artists and arts organizations in Maui. We've had response calls there, and those people are really working hard to forge programs with kind of brand new partners, hotels, major hotels, development corporations. And they even have the workforce program that is a federal program that is actually hiring artists to do some of the administrative work that comes after all this kind of disaster. And I just want to say one more thing, is that they had just passed and opened the Office of Wellness and Resilience. And that's in the governor's office. And we talked with the woman who's the director there, and she has said, we will pay artists to help us with the healing of the community in trauma-informed work. And so they have paid artists to also help break down barriers that impact physical, social, and emotional well-being of Hawaii's people since those awful wildfires. So my call to action for the audience today is to convene creatives and emergency response people in your communities and get them talking how they can know each other and know where each other is and how to contact each other. Get your network going.
Oh, my word, Jan. I have to say, I think you've set such a wonderful bar. And for the folks that are listening, I think you're going to get a few themes today: connecting, educating, and definitely engaging. The thing that I wanted to focus on is talking a little bit about disaster preparedness at the community level, right? That I think we do a lot of organizing around the relief or the response, right? The immediacy of what happened. And then we talk about the relief. How are we distributing resources? And then we talk very little about the recovery, which is so long-term and extended. And I know Javier Palmera from New Orleans is in the group with us today. He said a hello. And there's a lot of work that's happened there in post-recovery, but, even the city of New Orleans continues to navigate what recovery looks like post-Hurricane Katrina. So one of the things that has come to mind for me is that disaster preparedness is very personal. And we don't want to talk about it. It's one of the most boring things to think about as artists, as creatives, as everyday people. Nobody wants to think about our mortality, and nobody wants to think about the what ifs. Those can feel so insurmountable. And I think that it is important, and the opportunity ahead of us is really, how do we normalize disaster preparedness as just an everyday part of what we do? I suspect if we asked folks to raise their hands, how many people have their living will, their estate planning, their, it's any range of responses in every circumstance, in every conversation. And until we get to, 80% hands go up, we still have a lot of work to do. And so I think it's that, while there have been efforts over the years for, local arts agencies hosting workshops, webinars, trainings, providing resources, we have a whole section of our website, surfplus.org, where you can find information about safeguarding your workspace as an artist, any number of, corporate resources that tell you how to prepare in your office workplace. There's a lot of that out there, but it's erratic and sporadic. And I think we really need to move into a space where we are consistently offering access and consistently opening the conversation. So we often will see, folks doing, lunch and learns, or organizations that are offering support for capacity building. That let's normalize these activities as part of the day-to-day business of being an artist, or the day-to-day business of being an arts organization. Innovative ways to compensate or incentivize artists for their participation. I want to call up that it's still really important for us to just pay artists in every capacity. And I think in post-pandemic times, we really leaned on artists and the arts to provide us an escape, to give us an opportunity to express and to gather and to create connection. And in a lot of cases, we took that for granted. And there's this movement around artists being, the Band-Aid for our societal soul. And that's all lovely and wonderful, but we should pay for that support, and we should provide compensation for the work that they're doing, because it is work. We would pay for, we all pay for streaming services. Why aren't we paying for artists to provide content to us? And yes, I think that artists are some of the most giving humans that walk the planet, but we shouldn't take that for granted, and we shouldn't obligate them to provide that to us. We should pay for that commodity and asset just like we would for anything else. So for me, innovative ways, hey, we're still finding ways to do it. And a lot of the, federal programs that were made available that supported individual artists during the pandemic, I would call innovative. A lot of the funders that reduced reporting requirements, reduced entry points, eliminated barriers, reduced, final reporting requirements, provided and transitioned project support to unrestricted spend it how you need it funding. That needs to continue. And so I really am hopeful that in the future, we continue to see innovations, if you will, of making access to resources more easy and normalizing these disaster preparedness practices. And so my call to action, if you're an artist, get connected to your local arts organization, whether it's an arts agency or an arts council. They exist at the local, state, county, regional level, and they're there to help you. And in a lot of cases, they're the ones that are going to be the conduits through which you can get access to more information and more programs and more support. And if you're an arts organization, get connected to your local infrastructure, whether that's your city government and disaster planning services. Learn more, educate yourself, educate your community, explore resources, learn more about what common disasters happen in your location, and get prepared. And then examine your current practices. If you don't have anything in place, you will struggle more in the event of a disaster or emergency. So the more prepared and informed you are, the better you're going to be to weather a storm. And so that's my call to action. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you both. And I don't know if it's advantageous or disadvantageous to go last. Those are very strong responses. But I wanted to kind of preface mine with a little bit of background of what the Heritage Emergency National Task Force, or HENTF, is and does. And so the Heritage Emergency National Task Force, or HENTF, because we would go on way over time if I kept saying the long form, is a public-private partnership co-sponsored by FEMA and the Smithsonian Institution. Specifically, it's FEMA's Office of Environmental Planning and Historic Preservation and the Smithsonian Cultural Rescue Initiative. And together, we advocate for the protection of our nation's cultural heritage. And so we leverage the expertise of our membership of more than 60 culture and emergency management related national service organizations and federal agencies to help FEMA and its federal partners connect with and assist cultural institutions and arts organizations at the local level. So my responses today will be a little bit different from Jan's and Ruby's in that it's a less artist focused and a little bit more towards the cultural institution and arts organization side, but I think they really do complement each other and we have a lot of shared objectives and goals in this realm. So I'm very excited and honored to be here today. And so in response to that first question, there's one example that I wanted to share, and it's our capstone training program that's organized by SCRI and HENTF, and it's called the Heritage Emergency and Response Training, or HEART, as we fondly call it. And this is where we help cultural stewards and emergency managers better understand each other and what each other does when disaster strikes. And so we train them to work together to gain skills and hands-on experience needed to protect, evacuate, and salvage collections, and how to work together to protect these irreplaceable objects that really bring meaning and understanding to their community. And what happens after completing this week-long training at the Smithsonian Institution in DC is that participants are ready to support measures to protect cultural heritage in their own organizations and in their communities. And so I think that's really the kind of valuable takeaway about this training. And several of our HEART graduates have gone on to support measures to protect actual cultural heritage at their respective institutions and in their own communities. And one of the biggest strengths of the HEART training is the bringing together of participants from both of these parties, the emergency management and cultural heritage sectors, to build relationships and better understand each other's priorities and procedures and policies, because they vary quite a bit. And so that those relationships and knowledge base are built in advance of a disaster rather than doing when it's just really too late. And so these two communities need to understand each other and work together to protect our nation's cultural heritage. And I know we have representatives from both of these areas and more on this call today. So my call to action for the audience today is for the emergency management community to equally prioritize artists, arts organizations, and cultural institutions to other essentials, such as roads and hospitals, as a vital means of community operations and rebuilding following disasters. So I'll stop there and turn it back to the facilitator. Did we lose our facilitator? Do we need?
I will jump right in and continue. I thought Director Coleman would be able to join us, but that's okay. We're going to keep it moving and certainly grateful for the conversations and all that has been shared. Another area wanted just to highlight, were there any innovative ways to compensate or incentivize artists for their participation? I know there may be some thoughts on that, again, around any innovative ways to compensate artists for their participation. Any thoughts in that area?
I mean, I think the one that comes to mind is that a lot of times we think about artists within a philanthropic infrastructure, but typically governmental agencies can't do grants to individuals. And so I remember Nashville Metro Arts, their Department of Cultural Affairs, utilized the contracting system in order to provide funds directly to individual artists. So again, innovative. I don't know. I mean, they're just navigating what already exists, but innovative in the sense that it is a non-linear way to get dollars into the hands of artists for doing work to benefit the community. I also think in being able to embrace online payment systems like Cash App or Venmo. I've heard a few places now moving to a Venmo system just to move the dollars faster, right? So exploring and being knowledgeable in the different ways that commerce is showing up in the hands of individual artists would really help the larger infrastructure direct those dollars and get those dollars into the hands of the practitioner more quickly. And I think without a lot of extra lift, right? So there may be some bureaucratic processes that need to be attended to, but it's a bill paying system if you really, kind of take it at its basics. So, definitely utilizing any of those. You see a lot of artists putting their Cash App handle, their Venmo handle, their Zeal handle. PayPal is still a thing. And then, thinking about ways to support e-commerce for individual artists, I think is another way that we can help compensate and facilitate compensation to individual artists.
Excellent points. I appreciate that. If I could add one more question before I turn it back over to Marcus Coleman, could you, anyone on a panel, share with us one tip? If each person give us one tip to increase our collaboration between emergency management and artists. And I just want to get a sense, what's one tip we can do to help increase that collaboration? So maybe you'll first kick it over to Jan, and then you can, we'll go from there.
Focusing on, your county legislator and executive to really find out where the performing arts centers, the theaters are in that county that could possibly be venues for FEMA when they come to the community after disaster. And by doing that, there could be funding that would then go to artists who are usually artist teachers and can help do programming while people are trying to navigate procedures and protocols of FEMA. That works really well in that these facilities have what is needed. They have the big bathrooms. Well, usually the men's bathrooms are bigger than the women's, but that's okay. And they have kitchen facilities and open spaces that people can congregate and to have a meeting place. And so if that comes from the county figuring that out and approaching cultural organizations, I think then, and then also making sure that the artists get them paid for any kind of work that they participate in is a good real idea. And I'd say to my call to action would be to contact your county executive and really propose funding some of these arts organizations. I can't tell you what that has done for me. I've run 10 arts organizations and I've had local county government funding for everyone, and it multiplies. It multiplies more than what you would expect because we then say to the federal agencies or the state agencies, look, I'm getting this local support for my artists and my arts organization. You need to really be out there and saying, hey, are we funding our arts organization in our county?
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Ruby, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to go a different route and say invest the time to build relationships with your community. because collaboration has to come with a level of understanding, a level of trust, a level of resources that isn't immediate and isn't going to just like wave the magic wand and it's going to appear. You have to get out into the community. You have to understand who is holding the community spaces and how do those individuals then become conduits through which you can reach the rest of the community. There are going to be people who will not listen to anybody other than someone that they trust. And sometimes that trusted leader is an artist, a community elder. It's someone that may not necessarily be inside a traditional infrastructure. And so having those relationships ahead of time, having those relationships embedded. I remember early in the pandemic, folks would ask me, well, what should we be doing now in order for us to weather this? And I'm like, look, if you weren't doing this work 2 years ago, you're already behind the game. Like you're going to suffer, you're going to struggle. So just do the relationship work now, prioritize inviting people to come to you, take time to go to them, understand how your community is moving, and just be aware, be invitational, be open, be, participatory. It takes time, it takes, dedication, but the dividends on the other side of a disaster or an emergency, when we see communities that have been tightly knitted, just taking Maui as an example, they not only are able to mobilize at the hyper local level, but they've got then support from, the state of Hawaii. We've got representatives from different voices, and then working with national partners like NCAPER to be able to create this really wonderful web of information and connectivity and access. You can't just click and make that happen. Like you have to invest time in making that happen.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And Nana, just to wrap it up, again, one tip to increase collaboration. What can we do?
Okay, so I do think it's disadvantageous to go third. But my tip it kind of overlaps with the previous two. But I would say from an emergency management perspective, my tip is to make sure that you listen, because a lot of times the cultural community doesn't get a seat at the table in these important discussions, and they don't have the opportunity to really advocate for themselves. And so making sure that these communities are included in your conversations and the resources that you have to offer, I think is critical. And then on the flip side, for the cultural community to not be afraid to advocate for what you need. And to be clear about what your priorities are, what it is that you want to see in the response and recovery process moving forward to help guide the emergency managers to support your efforts. So that would be my tip.
Fantastic. So what I'm hearing is the importance of listening to community and the importance of having relationships before the disaster, right? We talk about blue skies, right? And so the importance of having those relationships in the blue skies before we get into gray skies, but really the importance of maintaining those long-term relationships with art institutions and artists is really key. And so again, I appreciate all those valuable tips that you shared. And at this point, we're going to turn it back over to Marcus Coleman, who will continue with the presentations moving forward. Director Coleman.
Yes, Nicole, can you hear me?
We can. So glad to have you back.
Wonderful. I'm going to give you my tip. My tip is what Ruby shared. Having those relationships, coordinating beforehand. In this case, Blue Sky was 30 minutes before the webinar. When the balloon goes up on an emergency, then relationships really matter. So thank you all for really being with us through what we know how to do at FEMA well, connecting with folks, having a plan, following the right orders and procedures of guidance, and working together to get the outcome. What I'd like to do now is if you can pull back up the slides, Monica, for the presentation. So we know that there are a lot of questions about resources and things, and that was the panel. And we wanted to give our special guests an opportunity to also share just a bit more about where connections can continue to go to get the training, get the access to information. Listen, these are two partners that do incredible work for artists, art and cultural institutions, but also for emergency managers. So for our emergency managers that are on the line, consider these resources for you too. So Jan, we'll pass it to you to do your presentation. And then Ruby, you can go right after, and then we'll begin to close out the call.
Thank you. Well, we can go to the next slide. And we've already really talked about how we can be partners in building ready communities, but we think of the creative sector way beyond just individual artists. I mean, there are a lot of creative people in entrepreneurial businesses and things like that you want to make sure you include to help the community not only heal but to have a better community when you come through whatever devastation it is. And I just want to say thank you to everybody out there working in FEMA. My first experience with FEMA was after Hurricane Agnes in 1972, when my home was under 20 feet of water, but the entire community in upstate New York was totally devastated. And it was a remarkable public-private partnership that brought that community from totally inundated to the first Main Street district. It was because people worked together and really had an idea of what they wanted the community to be like. Not what it was. It had been wall-to-wall bars and men's shoe stores. And it ended up being one of the best little art towns in the country. So I just want to thank FEMA so much for encouraging local creatives and leadership to be really part of the decision making. And I go on to my next slide, talk a little bit about the National Coalition for Arts Preparedness really came about after hurricanes Katrina and Rita, when we discovered that much of the arts sector was not really taken care of or part of the conversation of recovery. And you can see the partners that we have: Americans for the Arts, Surf Plus, Entertainment Community Fund, Grant Makers, of course, the National Endowment. And all these organizations have worked with us to be advocates for preparedness and disaster support for the entire arts sector through publications and resource development. We also facilitate post-disaster virtual convening for affected artists and arts organizations to connect to funders, service organizations, and businesses in the nation who can help with their need. We also have a training program. We train arts responders to work with their communities on readiness and mitigation projects. And I will talk a little bit about that CAM project. But the next slide, I am so excited that we get to update this, because the resources for the artists, it shows that this is part of the cultural safekeeping guide. All the gaps that we have been focusing on in our partners with other organizations to really help the arts sector. The money for repair of tools and resources for artists, we can say now, as part of the changes that come into effect March 22nd, that our individual artists will be taken care of. And I'm just thrilled about that. So thank you for anybody who was involved with that. Next slide, I talked a little bit about our resources. That you see the cultural placekeeping guide there in the kind of purple mauve color. And that can be downloaded for free from our website, mcaper.org. We also did a field guide to federal disaster relief, and not to disdain government speak, but we tried to demystify some of the things and protocols that FEMA and SBA and other federal agencies have when disasters occur. So that's both in, that guide is both in English and in Spanish, and again, can be downloaded as a PDF for free. And we have also the Arts Organizations at Crossroads Toolkit, which we'll be updating, because it's about what do you do when things really go awry, and what are your legal implications, etc. And that is an important thing, because many of the organizations that we deal with are very, very small and don't have a lot of resources. So the next slide really shows that our response. I talked about the calls that we've been having currently with Maui. I believe we'll have our 13th call on February 8th. After Hurricane Maria, we had weekly calls, then biweekly calls, well over a year for both Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. These are people, this was a way of artists to stay together and to really help each other, and we just facilitated and hosted those calls. We're hoping, with the help from everyone here, to have state and local activation teams in every state so that we know who our emergency response people are, what are the protocols, what can the arts do to really help in organizing and informing and educating. So the Crisis Analysis and Mitigation Program, CAM, is, I decided that we weren't really doing enough. We use the blue sky time for these arts people, arts responders, to really get together with the leaders and all voices in their communities to develop projects, mitigation projects that are of their determination. They do three-day workshops, and they decide we want to deal with this. Homa, Louisiana had such a CAM mitigation workshop. They decided they wanted to build a artist designed and built 15-foot Category 5 resistant tree, be a gathering place and a power source and information for people in that community in the Terrebonne parish to gather. That was their project, and the people in that workshop were from everywhere in that community parish, and they were artists, they were pastors, there were emergency response people. So it was very, very local, locals dealing with by determining what they wanted to mitigate and do better the next time. And it was really successful. So the next slide just shows the impact we've had over the years and what we're doing. The striped places are where we have had states in which we have CAM trained, certified arts responders. The little telephones are where we've had calls. We really reach a lot of people and organizations, and we are really grateful for your putting this together and allowing us to share a little bit about what Paper is doing and wants to do more. So thank you. Ruby.
Jan, thank you so much. What we will do now is we'll go to the next slide for Ruby. As you see, she's part of the coalition. So Craft Emergency Relief Fund, over to you.
Thank you so much. So the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, I do want to make sure that I stay on time. So hold on just a second. I'm going to start my timer. Okay, here we go. Drinking from a fire hose, y'all. Okay, so I'm currently the executive director of the Craft Emergency Relief Fund. The Craft Emergency Relief Fund was established in 1985 and really formed around the spirit of mutual aid. So when we talk about community, supporting community can be defined in a number of different ways. When artists who were attending different craft shows and marketplaces heard stories of their colleagues and friends experiencing disruptive activities such as natural disasters or everyday emergencies like fires and theft and personal injury, and finding that affected their livelihood and their practice as a craft artist, they would pass the hat and collect money to help offset and help bridge the gap for that individual artist. And that really was the spirit that established the organization. And we carry that forward now with a deep commitment to supporting individual craft artists across the country and in the U.S. territories of Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We work with regional organizations, state organizations, county, local art centers, museums. We work with, just small organizations. We work with deep individuals who are just getting together, a group of their friends who are artists who want to learn more about how to protect themselves, their work, and their community. And so I'm going to just share very quickly a couple of things to think about, kind of riffing on the call to action. Our website definitely has a number of resources that you can explore. We're more affectionately known as CERF Plus, CERFPLUS.org, where you can find tools and resources, videos and guides that help individual artists, specifically in the craft discipline, safeguard their practice. But these tools aren't just for craft artists. They're actually pretty applicable to other artistic disciplines. So if you're working with individual artists, these materials and tools are going to be helpful. And if you need to find something that you can't find, just let us know. We are happy to help. We, as part of NCAPER, have access to a very large network of other disaster-focused organizations that are serving different disciplines across the country. So certainly think of us as an intermediary, as a service organization, as a partner, and as a resource. Next slide, please. So some things to think about. I know we've got some artists on the call with us today. I know we've got representatives from some arts organizations. So I wanted to just invite you all to think about learning more about what common disaster events happen in your community and then prepare in anticipation. A simple Google, most common disasters in your city, your state, your region, this time of year, that time of year, illuminates information that may not always feel top of mind. I know when I'm doing a talk or a training, it's one of the first things that I do to prepare in order to customize the content to the audience that I'm speaking to. So once you've done that and you've figured out, okay, well, in Utah, it's earthquakes and floods, and I believe it was hurricanes. Don't quote me, I could be wrong. It's been a little bit. But knowing that, you're then able to prepare appropriately, because you can't do it all in a day, and you certainly can't prepare for everything that might happen. But if you have an understanding of what the most common occurrences are in your community, then you can focus your time and resources, your effort and your connections in service to being prepared for that experience. Also, explore local and state disaster networks and then get involved. I did see in the Q&A someone mentioned the volunteer organizations active in disaster network. Every state has one. There's also a national VOAD. They're called VOADs. Hop on their website, learn a little bit about what they're doing in your community. A lot of the national organizations have activities that are happening or have connections across the country. So if you were to call us up and say, hey, I would love to learn more about what you're doing in Tennessee, because I happen to be talking to Tennessee tomorrow, we have a database that carries information all the way back that we can provide to give you a sense of what we're seeing and what that may mean for you as you think about preparing within your community. Talking with your community, hold a lunch and learn. Host an open forum, serve some pizza, hop online. There's different ways to organize. Check in with the National Service Organization. We love supporting activities at the local level. If you want us to come in and do a workshop, we're happy to do that. And I know a lot of my colleagues would welcome that phone call as well. And then again, inviting service organizations to share information. We can provide content for your newsletters, your communications. We can also share and host you on our blogs in order to build more visibility about the work that you're trying to do in your community around preparedness. Next slide. If you're a government entity, agency, or disaster-focused organization, think about connecting with your state, county, and or local arts agency or cultural affairs department. Then invite them to your meetings or gatherings. A lot of times, folks are working in redundancy because we just don't have the time. Maybe we don't have the connection. Maybe we just don't have, the relationship built in order to understand what's happening around us. But we all exist inside these larger circles. So let's open them up. Let's invite people in. Let's share information with folks so that people know what's happening and where they may or may not contribute or benefit from the activity that's going on. Connecting with your national and regional art service organizations, folks like the Western State Arts Federation, WESTAF, folks like South Arts, who's been one of the longest running participating regionals supporting disaster preparedness, relief, and response. A lot of them have information, have access, have relationships that you can be a part of, that you can leverage, that you can you contribute to in order to help strengthen the preparedness infrastructure in your community. Including the arts community in your planning. For those of you that are doing this disaster planning, look around, knock on some doors. Who can come in and have a conversation with you about what you might be able to provide them and what they may be able to provide you? Thinking about mutual benefit, thinking about shared resources, thinking about unique assets. As Jan mentioned, a lot of times arts organizations might have these large venues that you can use as meeting spaces, that you can use as information distribution centers where people feel comfortable coming as another meeting point. And then where you think about where you can direct existing funding and resources to support the arts community. All of this is capacity. All of this requires resource and funding and support. So if you are reaching out and reaching into the arts community to work with artists and to work with arts organizations, do your best to provide access to funding, resources, and additional capacity to build and strengthen that infrastructure inside the arts community to the benefit of the broader community. And this could be in terms of preparedness, relief, response, recovery. The arts are going to benefit every entry point that you create as you're thinking about supporting your community through a disaster. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much and shout out to all of my colleagues who have been doing this work with us and for us. And so thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruby, and shout out to you as well. If we go to the next slide, please. So when we start talking about doing things in preparedness with the arts community, we want to share one last example, and then we'll have closing comments from our executive director, our director of external affairs, Justin Knighton. So I'd like Justin to provide a little context here, and then we will close out the call. Few things to know before we go to Justin. You will receive a copy of this presentation and slides, and if you're watching this recording, you are able to get that information at FEMA.gov. But we want to encourage everybody to continue to partner. So with that, Justin, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. This is Justin Knighton. Thrilled to be with all of you. And we wanted to make sure that we ended on a note of preparedness and resilience. And as we think about the critical role we have in emergency management to deliver a message, it becomes very complicated and difficult to deliver a message in a way that helps resonate with the communities that we're trying to reach, right? And just getting groups of people to understand something in the very competitive world that we have of delivering messages and trying to have your thing be the thing that resonates, that already is a huge mountain to climb. It becomes even more challenging when we are not only asking to build awareness among those that we're trying to communicate with, but also to motivate action, get them to do something. This is very true in the before disaster, in which we are asking individuals to know and understand their risk, to understand the need to prepare, and then to actually take the step to prepare. This becomes a very challenging dynamic for emergency management and government at every level. We at FEMA, you'll hear us a lot talk about cultural competency in the work that we do. This quite literally means understanding communities and understanding where they're coming from, their histories, their cultures, their values, and really prioritizing that and how you are not only packaging a message, but delivering it. And so with our Ready campaign, we decided that we were going to focus intentionally with a partner at the Ad Council and partners that they help cultivate. Here you see Lopez Navarrete Communications to help us do that more effectively for the Latino community. And 2 years ago, we embarked on an effort to really understand how to deliver a preparedness message using art and culture as a lead emphasis to help do that more effectively, right? We did focus groups with the community to really understand community and found that Latinos, a community of which I'm a member, see themselves as good planners because they're planning so many events in life, right? Quinceañeras, weddings, birth dates, family barbecues. But when it came to thinking about the steps to prepare, many members that we interviewed didn't see the same steps of planning those big life moments in the same way as taking steps, taking the time to prepare for disaster. And we really merged the two together, that the same thing that you're doing in planning these big life moments, these big gatherings for the people that you love, it's the same type of approach when you're taking steps to plan for a disaster. But what's more important is that you're doing something that actually could save their life. That seemed to resonate across the charts. And we decided to anchor a campaign that really built on that reality and using art as a tool to do that, right? As you'll see here, one of the images of one of the family gatherings in the ad is really modeled after Michelangelo's The Last Supper, an image that really resonates with many Latinos. And you'll see this treatment of using inspiration of art, high art, of images that are iconic, that resonate with Latino communities as part of the inspiration of the design of this ad. And so it's been profoundly impactful in how we've upticked our listo.gov website presence among Spanish speakers and Latinos across the board, across the United States, to drive traffic to our website to actually take the steps to prepare in ways that are more culturally competent. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone on the call, everyone who took the time to join this conversation. This is just the beginning of what we at FEMA are looking to advance this year. Expect from us as a follow-up soon, a fact sheet that helps to take this very dynamic conversation and present it in a way that helps both emergency managers, artists, and art and culture institutions understand what's available to them. First and foremost, what funding at the federal level through FEMA is available. Two, best practices that FEMA has been able to champion over the years and how we merge together the important work of arts and culture with preparing people, helping people before, during, and after disaster, as well as some considerations for those both in the art world, but also in the emergency management world who haven't really gotten started in this important partnership work yet and could use some suggestions or recommendations on how to get started. So expect that and so much more from us at FEMA as we work to advance this important relationship and collaboration. I want to thank the National Endowment for the Arts for spurring these types of conversations to make sure that we are putting people first in all the ways that we are committed to at FEMA and doing so in a way that really elevates, again, those artists and art institutions that make so much of the work before, during, and after disaster effective and possible. Special thanks to our moderator today and his effortless ability to, even in a crisis moment, keep us going and ensure a successful conversation, Marcus Coleman. Huge thanks to Michael and Frank. Thank you to Jan, Ruby, Nana, and Nicole. And special thanks to Holly and Debbie for providing ASL translation for us today. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to more engagement. And with that, that's the end of our call. Thank you.
All right, y'all. So we will grab transcripts. We will be sure to share out this information. And again, cannot thank you all enough. And a special thanks to Nicole for being my partner in collaboration during an emergency situation. With that, make a plan, have a kit, and make sure that your full team is informed in times in case anything happens. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.